Hi, my name is Jeff Nepper with Flow Software, and I'm excited to build out a Timebase project with you today. I have a fresh Windows install, a couple of different data methodologies for accessing data like an OPC server and an MQTT broker ready to go, but I haven't done anything at all yet to install Timebase or configure the historian solution. So we're going to do that from scratch. I'm going to teach as we go. And my goal is that at the end of this video, you'll have everything that you need in order to stand up your own Timebase instance in a Windows environment, and that you'll be able to be successful with the solution. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to first go register my solution and download the software. So I'll do that at timebase.com. Click on Getting Started. And then if you would please take a moment to register your instance. We're going to use this so that we understand who our audience is, what their experience levels are, how they are going to use the solution, and then be able to provide feedback to them as we have new features or maybe a security patch or a bug fix. We want to be able to let you know. So if you would just take a second and register, it would be super helpful with us. We aren't going to sell your information, and we won't be pesky at all. I give you my word. One of the really important pieces of information that you can provide for us is whether you have an OT or an IT slant. That really helps us understand our audience and then engineer our tools specifically to that, as well as where in the world you sit. Certainly there's different language, localization, and cultural considerations we want to be able to make. And then help us reach others like you. Tell us how you found us. All right, now from here, I'm ready to go ahead and download my free copy of Timebase. There are no licensing restrictions here. Feel free to use Timebase as often in any capacity as you would like. You can put multiple copies inside of a business, use it at home, use it in a dev environment, onboard it and put it on your own products or put it inside of your own solution stacks. It's completely okay. I'm going to pick my environment, and this is going to launch me into our knowledge base. The knowledge base is that first line of information on how to do things inside of Timebase, and the quick start guide that this opened up for Windows is going to give me every step that I need to be successful in getting started. Now that starts with a message to our beta testers. If you've been a beta tester, please make sure if you're going to version 1 that you are removing your previous environment and starting fresh like I am today. Now, moving forward, we will be backwards compatible with versions of Timebase. We just weren't able to do that in beta testing. We've done too many changes to try to stay backwards compatible there. Let's talk a little bit about architecture. So you're going to have 3 main components in your install today: our data collectors, our historian, and then the explorer, which is our trending tool. All of that will be managed inside of the Timebase services config. So you'll see as I install and launch that I have control over my collectors, my historian, and my explorer from Timebase services. I can install as many collectors as I would like. It's always encouraged in a production environment to put those collectors as close to the data source as possible. So my MQTT broker or my OPC server, for instance. That way I can use the store and forward if I would lose connectivity to the historian. Maybe I've got a network outage or I'm doing a patch on the historian server. Store and forward makes sure that we buffer any data that's being collected locally so that you don't lose that. So today's demo though, we're going to install everything locally. This is not a production environment, it's just a teaching exercise. Let's go ahead and get started with the download. There are some hardware and software prerequisites. If I want to see a full list, follow that link. That's my full list of hardware and software requirements. But for now, just know that we're going to do a check for .NET 8. That is the ASP.NET Core runtime that we need. And make sure if you are downloading that, you go to the Windows Hosting Bundle solution. Download the installer, let that download, and then we will run it. All right, again, quick start guide's important. It's right here in the installer, link to this quick start guide. We've done our prerequisite check for .NET 8. I am good. If not, I could download it from here. Take some time, read the license agreement. I say that, I don't know if anyone ever does. It is boilerplate, but still, protect yourself and read it. And then now is where I choose if I'm doing a distributed architecture or a local architecture. Again, teaching example only, so everything stays local for me. Our default installation directory. I do want to call out, we've placed this inside of our company name, Flow Software, and then the solution for Timebase. As I'm working through this, you'll probably see Flow as well as part of this. I have installed my Flow information platform because I do use this box for additional demos other than Timebase. But you do not need to install Flow information platform at all. So Timebase is completely separate. It works independent of our other products, and you do not have to in any way, shape, or form engage with us in a business relationship with Flow information platform in order to use Timebase. All right, so as this is installing, you might be asking yourself, hey, how are you guys doing this for free? Can I trust it? So that you know, free for us is really important. We have run into so many small and medium-sized manufacturing facilities that don't have good historians or don't have one at all. And we know that data management is the foundation for information management. As Flow Software, we really focus on information management. And so when we found out that most manufacturers that we encountered don't have great site-based historians, we wanted to do something about it. And that's why Timebase was born. Now, to sustain our business model long term, we will offer subscription modules that in the future will allow you to do really cool analytics with this data that you're storing. But we are committed and make a pledge to you that we will never change the business model for the historian. It is free forever. If you'd like to read more about that, you can do so from the website and just add pledge to the website URL, and here is our commitment to you. All right, so installation has run, and you might have noticed that the installer automatically launched the port 4510 on my local host. That's because as I come out of this installer and finish, let's go ahead and bring it up. The installer knows that I need to use my Timebase services and manage my Timebase services, so it has gone ahead and run those for me. The very first thing that I'll just do, just to teach here, is show you that we have installed a Windows service, and that Windows service is called Timebase Service Starter. That will run automatically, and it is running by default. Nothing to do here, just so that you understand that is the service that we installed. And then now I can control the different components of Timebase and manage those services through this control panel. So right now, I have installed by default 4 different data collectors. A data simulator, that's where we're going to start. So let's go ahead and launch the simulator. Notice that as I turn on the simulator, the stack is now live. Very first thing to do, turn on some of your stack components. So the historian is now running, the explorer is now running, and the data simulator are now running. Notice that the port numbers have now become hyperlinks so that I can get to those additional configs. Let's start with maybe an overview of the services, and then we will move over to each of these configs. Across the top, I've got 3 different tabs. We're currently under the control. There's a config and a status. If I take a look at the status, it's just giving me the logs, and we're using the exact same UI for all of the configs. So once you understand this one, you'll be good on all the others. My logs have 3 different features. I can scroll to the latest version of or the latest message, I should say, in the logs. I can clear the logs, and I can copy the logs onto my clipboard. Additional icons here at the top, a link to our knowledge base, a feedback report. Super helpful if, as you're using the tool, you have an idea that you want to share with us. This is not for support tickets. This is for you to give us feedback about things that you like. This will not open a support ticket. Please be aware. We have a path for that. I'll show you that. And then bug report. Bug report is a great way to communicate with us on something you found that's just not working the way that you think that it should. Again, it does not open up a support ticket. It's just telling us, hey, I found something I want you to take a look at. Don't expect a response from us on the bug report. It doesn't mean that we might not reach out and ask for additional information, but on the bug report, we would want you to tell us what component were you using, what happened, and then please help us out with a screen capture or a video. That will absolutely make it much more effective for us to be able to fix the bug that you're reporting. Okay, so what about if I do have a support ticket? You're going to start with the knowledge base. By starting with the knowledge base, we have really spent some time in providing detailed documentation and videos inside of the knowledge base. If you get stumped and cannot find your answer, here is where you start your support ticket with us. Support is free with Timebase, so we will engage with you on an email ticket basis, and typically expect 24 hours to 48 hours or 1 or 2 business days for response time. Just depends on load. We do expect to be busier in the first 2 months than we will be in the previous or the following 2 months. Okay, so that's our status. We've looked at our control panel. Now let's take a look at the config. So you might be asking yourself, how did these get named and created? Why is the OPC UA called OPC UA and such? All of this can be managed inside of the config. The config is a JSON object that describes what services we should be running, where the config for those services, the data, and the logs for those services should be stored. So it's pretty basic if you look at it. We have a group of collectors. The first is MQTT logger. We have designated it not to be active. There is a path to the config, to the data, and to the logs files. Notice that the name of the collector needs to match the name of the folder that those are stored in. And then we have a description on which port to use for our endpoint. So let's talk about where this JSON object actually lives. So if I make an edit here in the config, where is the file that I'm actually writing to? If we browse to our program data, follow Flow software. Again, remember, I have also installed Flow's information platform, so I will have a Flow folder beside Timebase in both program files and program data. You probably won't unless you're also running Flow. And let's look at the service starter. So inside of the config folder is the bootstrap config. That is this file. So as I modify this file, I'm updating this file. Also note that inside of the collectors, right now I have the simulator. That's because I have started the simulator service. So Timebase has built out a simulator folder. And inside of that, I have config, data, and logs. Inside of each of these is a series of files. So if I come back and minimize, what I'm seeing right now is that OPC UA has not been activated. That means that I haven't created this structure yet, config, data, and logs. I have not assigned this port to it yet, but I have done that as I come down the file to the simulator. Hope that makes sense. Let's go ahead and do a modification. I'll show you what happens. So I am going to use Kepware. So let's go ahead and give them credit, and we'll just call the name of the instance KepOPC UA. As well as just know that because I've changed this, I need to change this as well. So whatever the name of the services, please make sure that is also the names of those folders. If I wanted to adjust that port, I could do so now. I'll leave it alone though. As I've made a change in the file, it's prompting me to save. I will go ahead and save, and now I have overwritten the bootstrap.config. There's nothing else for me to do. If I come back to the control panel, I can see that I've picked up that change And now if I started this service, come into the collector, it has built that folder for me and the folders inside of it. All right. Let's go ahead now and jump over to the historian. All right, as I was saying, let's talk about the status tab. If we take a look at the logs, we can see our historian has just started up. I have the folder data where I'm logging to, and the path is program data flow software Timebase historian /data. Well, what if you wanted to change that path? How would you do that? You would come over to your program files, flow software, Timebase, historian, and then open up and edit your app settings.json. This is where I am telling Timebase where to store both the data and the logs. By default, we're sending that to program data. If you're going to change that, simply give us a new path and then uncomment, save, and then once you've saved, come down to that Windows Services, open up Timebase, and give this a restart. Okay? So that is one of the only times you'll need to come in and do a restart on the Timebase service itself. Important to note, if you're going to make this change, do yourself a favor, do it now. Don't do it later and have to migrate data. So if you want to store it on the D drive or a network drive, fair enough. Just make that change, please, early. That should be part of your original architectural decisions. Okay, so that's our status. Currently no tags, no data sets. Let's take a look. Data sets are empty. So we create data sets actually based on the login session. It's a one-to-one match. Every login session should have an independent data set that it's logging to. You can log from a login session to multiple historians, but you'll log to the same data set on each historian. A data set consists of all of the tags, the qualities, the values, and the metadata, or the properties for those tags. We write a new data set file every hour, and that has all of the values and quality changes for those tags. So in order to get a data set started, we are going to pop back over to the service starter. Go ahead and just close out some of these other windows. And we will take our simulator. This will be our first example. Open it. And same thing. We open to status. You can see that the logs are telling me that I am running. The service is running, but I'm not active. Well, great. Let's take a look and see how we do this. So I click on config on first load. It'll take a couple seconds to build out and load. And now we're ready to go. I've got a couple of different files that I'm going to write to on this config for my logging sessions, my historian, and my settings. So before we get too deep into each of these parts, let's again show you where I'm actually writing this to. It was back there under the program data. We've already reviewed it. I just want to tie each of the areas in for you. So here in the simulator, config, data, and logs. Logs would be, of course, my logs over on status. Data is where if I'm in store and forward, I'm going to buffer the data to disk. And config is going to be the collector information, the historian's information, and the settings information. So this is the collector information. What is the data source type, and what is the targeted data source? This is the historian's information. What historian should I be sending, or what historians should I be sending data to? And then the settings information is over here on the settings window. So making changes to these items updates those corresponding files. So the very first decision to make is here for this simulator login session. What is my data source type? Now we named it simulator because we figured you'd want to run a simulator. So we'll default and keep it at the simulator. And how about the name of the data set? What would you like to call it? I will leave mine defaulted to the Juice Factory. That way, by doing so, it'll be easy for you to follow along if you leave yours to a default as well. And how about historians? Do you want to modify the historian that you're currently going to log to? Maybe yours is not local. That's fine. You can come in and change it here. So here is the name of the historian. Here is the IP address or the server name, in my case, localhost. Here's the port, and save or cancel, or if I choose, delete. What if I wanted to add a historian? Same process. Maybe I had a redundant or a Q&A dev environment, give it the IP address, give it the port, and so on. Pretty simple, right? Okay, so that I'm going to leave alone. Now let's talk about this simulator file. So in our JSON object, you will see that we have provided commented out documentation telling you exactly, in this case, where the knowledge base information lives for this. So if you wanted to understand the settings better, here's where you would go to get that information. Very first part of this is how many days should we backfill? And then as you come down, we have a series of sequences, which are essentially how you would build out your simulator file. Now for us, we are going to automatically build out 10 different fillers as part of a manufacturing process. So think of empty bottles coming down a conveyor, coming into a round filler, and then those bottles being filled with a measurement around production count, good, bad, what was the state of the machine, what was some of the information that we might have from the PLC, like what product were we making, what was the temperature, what was the energy being used, things of that nature. Now, we would encourage you, if you're so inclined, to build out some of your own simulators. And if you look at the knowledge base, there's a good bit of detail around how you can do that. And then moving forward, we're excited to do some different community activities where we might do a challenge around who can build and share some really cool simulation files so that we can all benefit from that. Okay, so if I wanted to change anything here, I would make the changes. Same thing, I would get a save prompt, and then I would play. If I make a mistake in this, I always have the option to do a reset. Reset is going to look to the data source type and then repopulate inside of the settings window the JSON object as it was defaulted. Know that doing a reset will overwrite what you have done, so use that with caution. I'm going to leave this completely alone, and that means the only thing I really need to do at this point now is start my login session. Starting the login session will generate a backfilling of data 7 days, and it will automatically create the data set, the juice factory, and then begin moving that data from the data collector plugin to my historian. So I'll hit play. Let's look at the status. And we can see what's happened. So it's now active. It has created and configured the appropriate paths. It has set the data set. It is now pushing to the historian, and this is my buffer indicator. My buffer currently has 82,000 values in it. That is that process of the backfill. Now I can update my page and get updates on that buffer, or it will auto refresh after, I think, 30 seconds or so. Let's take a look at the historian, do a refresh on the historian, and I now have a juice factory data set. A couple of things that I want to cover. Purge age. This is a setting for how many days should pass before we purge the oldest data inside of the historian. So if I set this, say, to 3, I would only keep 3 days of history for the juice factory. I could also choose to do this based on size. I could set this to a terabyte, and I would only have the most recent terabytes worth of data. Zeros for either of these represent a default value of do not purge. I also have a tag count. If I click on the icon, that allows me to change things like purge age and purge size. If I select the link for the juice factory itself, that will now show me all of the tags inside of my data set. So this is where I can do data set management or tag management. So let's start by just kind of running down what are the columns that I have here. First, in my title, it is a count of 70 tags in total. I can select all tags and do mass edits, or I can select a handful of tags by using the filter. Notice that I have a name, a description, a unit of measure, fields, metadata or properties, format, and then data type. So I'm going to start with a really basic edit, and then we'll do something more advanced. So here's my tag name, 131fq001.pv. What does that mean to me? Well, I do have a description, and my description is that that is associated with filler 1, and it is a flow total. Notice that I have a unit of measure, cubic feet, and I have some fields. An FQ field, a flow total field, a 131, a filler, and a 1 field. So this represents different pieces of metadata about this tag. This has been supplied because on the data simulator side, we have already built this. So we have provided this in that JSON object as part of that data simulator. But what if I was just logging data elsewhere and I didn't have that information? How would I build it? You would build that by editing the tag, or a group of tags for speed, which I'll demonstrate in just a second. So I have the capability to change the description as necessary, update my units of measure. I'll talk more about adding units of measure on another example. I can build out more fields, change the format. Format represents how do I want to show the data. Maybe with this format, I want to always show a comma if it is a thousandth or higher, and I'd like to show to the 100th with my decimal places. What about the data type? We'll leave it at a double, and now I can just save my change. But what if I wanted to do that for more than just this tag? That's where I could do multi-select. So I could come through and try to select with my shift. That doesn't work. I'm in a browser. I'd have to manually check all of these. I don't want to do that. So it would be faster for me to isolate the tags I want using a filter. So what do these tags have in common? Currently here with version 1, we are supporting filtering only on exact match. So I can't do an and or, I can't do partial matches, meaning I can match 131, but I couldn't say only 131 that's FQs. If I did a 131-FQ, I would match those. For me, right now, the easiest way to match would be just to use some of these properties, like flow total. And then I can select all. I'll just copy my format, and I'll overwrite and give all of these that format. I can do the same thing if I wanted to delete those tags, by the way. So I could reselect, edit, and then delete. A couple things about deleting tags. You can delete them one at a time. You can delete them in groups. Once they're gone, they're gone. We don't archive. There's no backup. If you delete the tag, you're deleting the tag out of the current data set, and you're deleting all of the history for that tag in that data set. So once you've done that, you've done it. There's no getting that back unless you have independently been backing up these data sets and have them offline. A second point, don't try to delete a tag unless you've also already removed it from your logging session. So as you can imagine, if I delete these tags, the next time the simulator writes a value, these tags are just going to show back up, but I'm not going to have the history. So I'll delete the history, but I will get this tag, the tag will persist with new data as it comes in. I don't want to delete my tags. We'll let that be. All right, I've demonstrated a multiple tag update. Let's now talk about that unit of measure. So I'm going to look at my state tags as an example, and you'll notice that my state tags, well, that's not exactly the unit of measure maybe that I was expecting to see for state tags. So what does that actually represent? Let's take a look at one of them. And what you can see is that with my units of measure, I have indicated in the first column a value. So this is a int. And when an int has a different value, I have made an enumeration for that value. So this is great for state tags or for any type of your process where you have a known variable that is matched to a value. And what's going to happen later on is you'll see in Explorer is that when I have a state, in this case of 21, and I know that means I've encountered a bottle starvation, well, that's what I'm going to display instead of displaying a state of 21. So you can build as many of these as you'd like. Right now, as part of the first release of the product, we don't support expressions here yet. Notice I said yet. So for right now, this is only really to be used for integers, and it's only meant for direct ordinal pairing. But pretty neat, I think, right? We have a lot of exciting opportunities to do things here with this. Okay, so I think that's probably a pretty thorough overview of how to manage your tags inside of the directory. I guess maybe the only other thing you might have noticed I didn't cover is that when I had those state tags, I picked up the number of filter tags that have been made available to me. 70 tags in the directory, 10 tags currently under filter. Okay, so let's go ahead and tackle that Kepware server. I've got it running. I want to connect to it. So what I'm going to demonstrate for you now is how do you take a existing login session, one that's not active, and repurpose it for another data source type. So notice that by default, I've inherited the data simulator. It's not running. I can't log two different data simulators to the same historian. But what I can do is go ahead and say this is going to be another data set. So we'll just call this Kepware, and pick that OPC UA data source type. So now I'm going to log to this historian with this data set using the OPC UA data source type plugin. But notice that my settings are still representing the simulator. I need to pull a reset. The reset will now reset the default to what is set up for OPC UA. So I have now pulled the default definition for this plugin, and I just now need to modify it. So we've included a lot of instructions that have been commented out, including the path to the knowledge base. If I want to use security, I would pull this comment, decomment this, and I would change the security policy. Let's go ahead and take a look at where you're going to find all of this information with the knowledge base. As I come down, I'm sorry, I've gone a little quick through here, but as I've come down, here are all of my different settings. So if I want to add username and password for authentication, if I want to run a keep alive that is different, say, than the default values, if I want to add security, and then we'll talk more about subscriptions and topics in a second. All right. I'm using Kepware, as I said. Let's talk through if maybe you're not familiar with Kepware. I want to get you successful with the Kepware license demo so that you can make this connection also in your project. So install Kepware, go right to their website, download their trial, and it will automatically install and start running. But the first thing I need you to do once you've done that is out of your tray, right-click on KepEx and come into OPC UA configuration. If you want to follow along with me, then you're going to need to come into the security setting and change it to none. It's just simpler for me for this project. Note the port is 49320, And right there, go ahead and copy that. Keep in mind, if you make any changes, you need to reinitialize. So a change reinitialized, right click, and just go to reinitialize. Okay? I will take that address and I will place it here. All right, the next thing, I'm not using any authentication. So I need to come in and open up Kepware's configuration. Give it a second. And I'm going to do two things. First, I'm going to enable anonymous on my OPC UA connection. Second, I'm going to look at my Kep tags and understand what I want to subscribe to. If you're used to older historian technology, you're used to browsing the namespace of the OPC server, selecting a bunch of tags, drilling down into folders, selecting another handful of tags, drilling down into folders, selecting another handful of tags, so forth and so on. I personally have experienced watching engineers spend hours, sometimes days, just building logging sessions with the wrong tools. So I want to introduce you to a way that is better, we think, in doing this. But first, let's take care of that security. Right-click on projects, go to properties, OPC UA, make sure that anonymous is set to yes for allow. And again, here, if you make a change, immediately come in, reinitialize. With those two changes, I can now successfully connect to the server. But what am I going to log? I'm going to use their simulation examples and their functions. By default, when you install this demo, Kepware demo that is, you're going to get this file structure. I've modified mine a little bit. You may not have the exact same number of tags to match, but hey, if you wanted to do any type of, I don't know, load check, you could just select these, copy, paste, 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 so forth and so on. And you can build quite a large library pretty quickly. In fact, let's do that. Let's take a look at a larger tag volume. I don't know how many I have, but I've got quite a few at this point. And maybe we'll just do it one more time with this large mass of tags. Yeah, let's just grab them all. I'm purposely not grabbing those user tags. I want to show you something with the feature here. Okay, so now we've got a lot of tags in here. And a lot of these are changing at very high frequencies. And notice I've got a handful of user tags, user 456 and user 123. Notice that there is a subtle difference between those tags. There is a dash in between these tags that is not present here. Okay, so I've done this because I would like to show you how I can subscribe to this simulation examples function block, but not grab every single tag within it. So let's work through that. So as I come into my settings, I'm going to subscribe to a topic. I could subscribe to multiple topics. So in my example, I could subscribe to functions, and then I could subscribe to a subset of that. So my ramp and so forth. Instead of subscribing to multiple sets, and if I did that, by the way, I would just need to do a comma and then do another subscription. I'm going to subscribe to everything, but then use the filter rule to exclude some of those tags. So it is case sensitive, it is an exclusion filter, and it does support regex. Really important. Right now I'm editing a JSON object. Regex has that concept of a backslash to escape a special character. So for instance, in regex, I could say start of tag name, carry forward. So wildcard is the dot, the plus is carry forward. Question mark says lazy, meaning stop on the first match, and match anything user. If for any reason I was going to use an escape character, so it was user dash and then it was a number. I don't know what number it is. And so how in regex would I say it's a number? I would say escape D for digit. Problem. This is a JSON object. I am going to break my my file if I put that backslash there. So you have to do a double backslash if you are doing a escape character in regex inside of JSON. So hope that doesn't bite you. It's just something that you need to know when you're writing regex inside of JSON. But this will now log tags that are in the functions and exclude tags that follow that namespace. So let's go for it. Take a look at the status. And look at there, we have connected. We've built this folder structure, connected. Security mode is set to none, and we're browsing the namespace. We have started. We have found 2,534 tags. And let's take a look over at the historian. Refresh. And there they are. So pretty fast path, right? To be able to custom select the tags that you want, the tags that you don't. I could have done a series of rules inside of those subscriptions. So again, let's take our simulation example. And what if we wanted to create another simulator? We'll call this one our second example. So now I have second example functions, and I've got these tags here. Let's go ahead and reinitialize that runtime. Notice that it's warning me I'm already actively connected as a client. It said, hey, you're going to get disconnected. Is that okay? And yes, it ran into a disconnect. Said, hey, I can't actively connect to this anymore, and then it reconnected to a new session. Buffer filled up, buffer cleared out. So just to kind of show the robustness of the tool, if we lose that activity, we will reconnect. You're seeing the buffer spike up and down. That's because I've got a whole lot of tags that I'm connected to. Not maybe in volume, you might, or in sheer size, you might say, but notice, I didn't point this out earlier, notice the update rates. Don't know if you're familiar with the Kepware sim examples, but that's a change every 120 milliseconds. That's a change every 2 seconds. That's a change every quarter second, and so on. So I've got some pretty good update rates, and they're forced updates. So 3,000 or 2,500 tags, and very few of those tags are slow changing. I'm probably doing around 10,000, 15,000 updates a second right now. Now, let's stretch that and do even more by adding another example to this. Now, with my session paused, I can write a change to the file. Let's put in second example.functions.pound. We'll save it, and off we go. Clear out our buffer. Take a look at our historian, and we'll see whether or not I've got those tags coming in yet. So now I've got those tags coming into the historian, 5,000 tags being stored, and there's the full tag list. All right, if I wanted to say, no, I don't need all of those tags, pause the session, change the subscription, save your session, come over to the historian, filter, Notice the match, select, edit, and let's delete. Okay, so now I'm back to my standard. And I can go back to starting the session. I hope that was clear. That is how you set up for your OPC collector. Let's maybe take a look at one of the other collectors before we move on. What about Sparkplug? Let's give Sparkplug a start. Oh, you know, before we do that, I'm going to change the name of that. Our good friends over at Opto22 have a broker I'm going to use. Let's give it a name. You might have seen Benson doing a demo yesterday with Integrate Live. He piloted a Groove Rio and showed us how you could use a Groove Rio to grab data off the plant floor that otherwise might be lost. And then he started using the Groove to push that to an OPC server. Well, actually, the Groove is the OPC server, but to also publish to an MQTT broker and an OPC server. So he gave us some credentials for that. I'm going to see if I can still connect to it. So let's open up MQTT Explorer, and we'll start there. This was my Integrate Live box. Hey, he's still publishing. Let's go ahead and use that. Thanks, Benson. All right, so we can go ahead and take control of this. There's our session, make it active, and now let's configure. So for our config, what are we going to do? Same workflow. We'll call this Opto22 Groove Rio. Grab Sparkplug, hit the reset. And now I just need to know this information. So what was that? That was, I had an address. I believe it was demogroove.com. Use TLS false, but I do need username password. What is that username? And what was the password? Hey, do me a favor, if you would turn your head the other way while I type this in. Currently, we are going to, now we will encrypt this once we store it, but obviously for a demo, we don't want to share a password with everybody. So just take another look as I type in PASSWORD. They'll never know what that actually was because we use an @ symbol for the A. And then what am I actually subscribing to? So the way Sparkplug works is I need to give it a topic. My topic is going to be Integrate Live. Let's save and let's play. All right, so looking at the status, have we connected? We sure have. And now if I look at my historian, I'm expecting another data set. And there we go. 30 tags have come in. Purge is 0 and 0 by default. And now I've got all of these tags, but I've got no units of measure. I don't have any format. I don't have any fields. Again, this is where I can use the edit tags. I might want to do a field. So what is the device? I remember from my demo yesterday, he called this Rio IL. That was the name of this edge node. So now I am going to add that. Isn't that great? Okay. Look, if you also need to do a vanilla JSON collector, you're going to follow the exact same path. Okay. I will tell you that when you go to JSON, go ahead and pull up data collectors look at MQTT and Sparkplug and follow along the MQTT collector because, well, you really need to understand MQTT to be successful here. There's 3 different types that we support: a simple message, a simple JSON example, and a structured JSON example. So the team has done a good job of documenting this. You can go through here, and I believe you'll be successful if you know how to use MQTT. If you don't, it might be a little outside. Feel free, you can always ask us for a little bit of help. Again, we're going to do that over email exchange. The internet is flush with resources on how to subscribe to MQTT topics. Well, what if you want to delete data sets? So I've got a handful of data sets. I might, for whatever reason, no longer need that data. First thing to do would be to come in and stop the login session. So let's go ahead and we will open up our Opto22 login session. I'm going to come to my config and I'm going to pause that session. If I'm going to delete the data set, I might want to go ahead at this point also then and just return this to a different kind of waiting state, meaning I might also choose to go ahead and blow out and save that new configuration. Now, make sure that your historian is stopped. As that is stopping, I will also then go ahead and open up my program data folder. Navigate in program data to your install and open up the data folder. Here you'll see all of your data sets. So I'm going to delete the Opto22 data set. This is the configuration of all of my tags, and this is the data for those tags. So we have a different file for each of the hours that we're logging, and then we have some additional tag information. I need to go ahead, if I want to delete the data set, I want to delete all of this. Now come back and restart your historian. And the data set has been deleted. All right, so now we've got data in the historian. We've done this 3 different ways. Let's talk about how to visualize this data and how to get it out of the historian. First, how do we get it out via the API? Well, the API is one of the other free features that is included with every Timebase installation. So the API, we've done our documentation in Swagger. The great thing about Swagger is that I can try it out right inside of the tool. So I don't need to go use Postman to ask for what are my data sets. So API, get API data sets, gets a list of all data sets, and take a look at what we get. With the execution, I now know the name of the data sets: Juice Factory, Kepware, Opto22, Groove Rio. I know the purge age, the purge size, all of the information, including what is the tag count, how long have we been storing in days. Okay, so that is my get data sets. I can also get a data set directly by name instead of all, or I can do a post and I can update a data set. Maybe I want to change programmatically the name or the purge age. What about tags? So if I know a data set name, I can get a list of tags from that data set. Let's go ahead and try it out. And execute. And there is the list of all of my tags inside of that data set. Now, remember, we had a lot of different properties for these tags. So let's take a look at the schema. So if I want to understand the schema of this text, or of this response, I should say, come down to description, schema, and then expand. So what does N mean? N is a name. What does D? D is my description. So it's well documented. The team put a lot of effort into this documentation. I hope it pays off for you. Clear it and collapse. So that's how I get my tags. Now what about getting the data itself? Oh, by the way, I can delete tags via the API. I can post and update a tag in a data set via the API. So if I wanted to do add a bunch of properties, I might do it programmatically here instead of using the UI. And then what about data? If I just want to get tag data, I can read data for a tag from a data set. What is the data set? What is the tag name? Let's do Opto22, Groove Rio as our data set. And what are we going to do for the tag? I am looking for the temp. He had a great little temperature sensor. I want the value of that temperature sensor. All right, so with the data set and the tag name in place, now I just need to put in my start and end time. I can do the Unix time. I can do local time, UTC time with standard ISO format. I can do relative starts and relative ends. It's all documented, or I can just execute the last known value by leaving all of the dates empty. And there's my response. Last known value, the 19th, 1803, and I had a value of 69.56. There is the timestamp, and there is my good quality value, 192. All right, so API, yours to use, and then the ultimate question is, you're probably going to ask, do you support multiple tags inside of a query? Not yet, but our intention is to support that. And last thing to show, we've done our collectors, done the historian, done the API. So now we're ready to work with Explorer. Explorer is our trending tool. This is currently a beta version. We'll be releasing version 1 in the new year. A couple little things to walk through on this. First, we have the ability to save and open trends, delete trends. Let's give this a name and we'll save it. We'll call this our juice demo filler 1. And let's go ahead and save that. I can access, again, report bugs, go to the knowledge base, make feature request. Notice that there's features that are grayed out. So features that are coming, like being able to go into live mode, will be part of that version 1 release. Okay, so let's talk about the overall layout here. The top window, this is my context window. A context window is where I grab a tag and add a large range of history for context. So in this case, notice that I have a tag picker I've opened up. I can choose which historian I'd like to connect to. I'll choose the local historian. Now, where do you manage that? You would navigate through program data over to Timebase, Explorer, Config, and Sources. So if I wanted to have multiple historians, I would just create a list of those historians, restart the Explorer service, and then I could, from my single Explorer instance, pull data from multiple different Timebase historians. Pretty cool. Let's use our Juice Factory demo. And notice that within my Juice Factory data set, I can now see all of the different tags that I have. I have user tags and I have system tags. Tag listers on the right, and these select boxes will filter those tags for me. So system tags. Every data set that I log to has its own individual set of system tags. I can watch my memory, my CPU. I can look at my data set size, the number of tags, numbers of reads and writes, and time. User tags. This is what is being stored in the data set in the historian. I can filter this list by using the filter. I only want state. Or by also using the fields. I might only want state for equipment number 1. Select and add. I'll talk about this number 1 in a second, but for now we're just adding this tag to the context window. Okay, so the context window is giving me a large period of time. That period of time currently at the left edge is 12:18, almost 3 o'clock. At the right edge, 12:19, almost 3 o'clock. So that is a 1-day duration by default. If I'd like to change that time, I could change the left or the right with the date time picker, but I can also use my mouse for this. I can grab the time bar, the x-axis, and drag it left and right. I can also scroll to zoom in and out. Now, our data generation service is putting data into the future as well. So please note that we do have in our data simulator, you're looking at future data when you look at this data. It's not meant to stop at the live edge and keep generating every second. We don't want to use a lot of resources for data generation for simulators. Okay, so let's talk about a few things on this context window. The first is, notice that I have key markers at specific periods of time. So noon, midnight, noon. This happens based on what amount of time I have zoomed in and out on. So it updates accordingly, and then as I come in tight on time, we are drawing dark lines at the key periods of time, like an hour. And then the date is always represented at midnight. So I can see left edge date, I can see right edge date, and I can clearly see where we crossed over at midnight. Okay, the other thing to notice is that I have a frame on this window. This frame number 1, can be moved. I can grab the frame and slide it. My real time is represented with the green line, so that is the now time. As I update and refresh the chart, you'll see that green line moves forward. Now, what does the frame do? What is the purpose of the frame? The frame's left edge and right edge are what are setting the band's complete duration of time. So the left edge of band 1 corresponds with the left edge of frame 1, and so with the right edge. So if I look at this band, I can see this band has its own x-axis of time, and that starts at 12:19, 7 a.m., runs to 10 a.m., so about 3 hours in duration. If I grab the frame and move it, so does the band's concept of time. If I extend it, so does the band. So I hope you see that there is a linking of time with this frame to time on this band. Let's demonstrate that by adding 2 tags to the band. So this is my state. This represents my process. Let's bring in that same tag, and we'll add it to band, and it's linked to this frame. Remember earlier when I talked about being able to use your units of measure to do enumerations? This is the benefit of that. Instead of watching this step up to these different states, I'm representing this visually as one continuous run and segmenting those states with the enumeration label. If I need to see what's behind some of this, maybe I'm not able to see everything. So there's that's my enumeration label. All right, if I wanted to represent this data differently, I would use the legend to do that. Clicking on the legend opens legend properties, and here I could say this is filler 1 state. If I did not want to show that in a state, but wanted to show it in a line, I can adjust. If I wanted to delete the entire thing, I could do so. Let's add another tag. And this time we're going to add a temperature. I only brought back one temperature because I have still only selected equipment number 1. Let's add them all, and there's all of the temperatures. So now I'm looking at the temperature over top of the state from this left edge to this right edge. If I extend the state into the end of CIP, now I can see my cleaning and what has happened to my temperature in that stage. If I only wanted to see temperature during CIP, there we go. Let's give this a batch indicator. So this is batch 003. We'll save it. Okay, what if I want to compare temperature for this batch during CIP to temperature in the last batch during CIP? Well, now I can add another frame. Adding another frame will change my current duration of this window to whichever frame is the longest in duration. So we are aligning the left edge of this frame and the left edge of this frame on the left of this band. So now notice I've picked up a second time axis linked to frame 2. Let's give this a different name. And this is batch 002. I'm going to slide this over to the previous CIP. And now I am going to pick the temperature and the state and associate them with this frame as well. So let's add. We'll start with temperature. Same temp tag, but now associated with frame number 2. So perfect. Which CIP was longer? Frame 1 or frame 2? Well, frame 1 was the longest, 1 hour and 3 minutes, compared to 54 minutes and 39 seconds on the previous. Now I'm going to go ahead and just give these a better label. So I'll say temp batch 03, and we'll update that. And this one will be temp batch 002. I might want to change the color on this. It's really, of course, up to you. If I didn't want to draw in the same style, I could draw with the area. Of course, I can change opacity, I can change line thickness, and so on. Notice here at the bottom, I am picking up where the historian is that I'm storing the data in, what is the data set, and what is the default tag name and unit of measure. What else can I do here? I do have the ability to use a cursor value. And notice that the cursor value tells me the exact point in time for both tags on the axis above. If you look at the legend, you'll see that I have 2 values below each legend. I have a green value, which represents the time at the live edge, now. And I have a left value that represents the value on the cursor bar. So temp batch 3 is higher than temp batch 2 at this point in the process, 44.78 versus 41.67. I can also do a selection if I would like to know what was the duration of that time from left bar to right bar. I do that from a click and drag. Okay, I can build multiple bands. Here I might want to bring in, I don't know, let's bring in a flow rate. And I am going to associate this flow rate with both frame 1 and frame 2. And there they are. I'm also going to go ahead and unpin this from 0 and give it an updated name. Let's expand. And save. All right, so what's coming with this tool down the line? You'll be able to do a lot more. Again, this is just beta. This is built from scratch, by the way. This isn't in a library that we've used for this tool. It's not another training tool like Grafana wrapped inside of a Timebase wrapper. The team has built this from scratch, and that gives us a lot of freedom. So the very next thing that you'll see when we do version 1 release is the ability to put this into live mode. Super important. And then this data that's being represented, you'll be able to switch this to a data table mode. And with that data table, you'll see the raw data for that duration and be able to export that data into CSV. Super important for being able to get this data out and into other systems that you might want to work with. Of course, if you want to automate that, use the API. Okay, so that's a project. We started from scratch. We installed, we collected data from multiple sources, we managed that data inside the historian, and we've visualized that data and shown how to access that as well via the API. Look, your feedback would be really appreciated. There's two things I'd ask for you to do. Number one, if you have ideas about where we can go with this, maybe even ideas around what modules we could build on top of this that might be on a subscription basis, please share that with us. Your feedback is super important. It's how we want to develop this product, is to fit your use cases. Second thing you could do, you could help us out by sharing your experiences. We're not asking for you to sugarcoat anything. If you like the tool, if you don't like the tool, if there's somewhere in between, will you please do your best to help us advocate and share or evangelize what you think of a free historian. And really, this is what our goal with this is, to lift up the community and to provide solutions that matter and make a difference, make your day-to-day easier. So I hope we've done that with the first version. If we've missed the mark, let us know so that we can do it better on the next. Thank you so much for following along. I hope you've learned something. I hope that you'll give us feedback, and I hope you'll share your experience. My name's Jeff Nepper from the entire team at Flow Software and behind Timebase Historian Solution. Thank you.